Welcome to our literature talk series, Gegenüber TALKS, presented by the Goethe-Institut North America. Welcome, Susan Bernofsky, joining us from New York City today, and Veronika Fuechtner joining us from Boston. We are delighted to have you both with us. Gegenüber is our digital transatlantic magazine, and this event is part of our series Literatures Across Borders. We are actually presenting two more talks this year, both on the same day, December 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Our colleagues in Mexico are joined by the poet José Oliver and author Mario Martin Guijon. I don't know if I pronounced that right. About the challenges of writing poetry today. And at 7 p.m. that same day, we discuss contemporary German graphic novels and Mia Oberländer's Anna in contribution from the Goethe-Institut Chicago. But back to today, we are talking about Thomas Mann, one of the most influential German writers of the 20th century, on the occasion of his 150th birthday earlier this year, and the upcoming publication of a new translation of Mann's best-known classics, The Magic Mountain, Der Zauberberg. And joining us today are two leading Mann experts. Susan Bernofsky is an award-winning literary translator and directs the program in literary translation at Columbia University. And she has been working on this translation, The Magic Mountain, for the past 6 years, and it will be published by Norton early next year, or sometime next year at this point. Veronika Fuechtner is a frequent guest here at the Goethe-Institut Boston because she's teaching in our neighborhood. She's the chair of comparative literature and associate professor of German studies at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. She's been climbing the mountain together with Susan Bernofsky as an editor of the forthcoming translation. And she also wrote a book about Thomas Mann's Brazilian mother, Julia da Silva Bruns, the magician's mother, a story of coffee, race, and German culture. Welcome again to both of you. We are so excited to have you both with us, and I'm very much looking forward to your conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Karin, for this introduction and for giving us the space here to continue our conversation that has been going on for several years now, for quite some time. And we wanted you to just have a glimpse into our conversation that has been going on. And maybe we'll start talking about how we both came to working together on this project. Maybe you were in the project first, Susan. You start out.
Yeah, so we met each other through the American Academy in Berlin, and it was an incredible blessing to be connected to Veronika that way. She had a fellowship there in the spring of 2020, and I had a fellowship there in the fall of 2020, which means that my fellowship was remote because of COVID. But as part of their programming there, they always connect current fellows with past fellows for a public conversation. So they look for somebody whose work fits together, and our work obviously dovetailed so perfectly together that they connected us to do a public conversation about Thomas Mann. And the moment I met Veronika Fuechtner, I knew that I needed her to complete this project. And the past 6 years have shown quite clearly how very much I need her help and expertise. We're going to talk about how we've been working together. It's been a godsend.
Well, same here. I can only return the the love. I mean, it was clearly we clicked immediately when we started having this conversation about Thomas Mann, and then you got me on board to do the critical edition for your translation, which was really a wonderful opportunity. And I mean, I learned so much from working with you too. And I mean, one of the things that I found really fascinating, I mean, I had done translations before from essays from English into German, but I had no experience working with someone who does fiction. And that was really a revelation to me. And thinking about how careful and deep your translation process is, that was really inspiring. So maybe you can talk about some of the things that you do. I mean, like how you decide on what word to use, the kind of glossary that you do, and
I'll talk about that. I want to fill in for anybody who doesn't know. So we're working on a Norton Critical Edition, and this is a series that always pairs a new translation of a work with a critical apparatus done by a scholar who's an expert in that. So this is the way we're working together through making this Norton Critical Edition together. Although I think my translation will also appear as a standalone edition, but obviously you need the NCE, the Norton Critical Edition, so that you will have all the incredibly helpful apparatus, that the footnotes, the historical background that Veronica's contributing to it, which I'm not really qualified to do. So you prompted me to talk about sort of language choice. I know exactly what you want me to talk about. This is so this book is 100 years old. I'm translating it now. There are already two excellent translations out in English. The first one by Helen Tracy Lowe Porter from the 1920s, and the second one by John E. Woods from the 1990s. Both of them are superb translations. Mine is going to be different. It's, a 21st century translation. I have a different sensibility. I'm thinking about different things, whether it's politically, culturally, literarily, just because of living in a different time. But I like for translations that don't feel too anachronistic when they're presenting older works. And a way that I've developed in the course of my translation life to approach that is to think about how old words are. And so I've made friends. I'm best friends now with the Oxford English Dictionary because it breaks down subsets of meaning of words, and it tells you exactly when a word started to be used in English in a certain sense, a particular sense. And so I set myself the constraint for the translation of only using words in the translation that were already in use in English in that sense, which means that I'm looking up virtually all the words I'm using, which slows things down a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, one of the things I found amazing is that you keep a glossary of how there are certain words in German, like for example, Geist. We've talked a lot about that and how that can be translated in so many different ways. It can be spirit, it can literally be ghost, it can be intellect, it can be all these different things. And sometimes Thomas Mann uses them to mean different things at once, right? And you have to make that decision, what you're going to do in that particular moment. And I found it so amazing that you actually keep a record of
Yeah.
certain decisions that you made and then try to be consistent.
I mean, it's necessary because, Mann is obsessed with this sort of leitmotif structure that he cribbed from Wagner, and he will use exactly the same words when the same character comes back. He's describing certain things. And so each person is associated with very specific words. And if you translate them differently every time, that gets lost. And so in order to preserve this important structural feature of the book, I have a glossary that I've made just privately for my own work that's more than 100 pages now, literally. It's like 110 single-spaced pages where I'm keeping track of the words, what page, what line they showed up on, and how I translated them the last time, so that I can make sure to keep that consistent because it's crucial to the structure of his book. But yeah, we were just talking this morning about Geist, apropos of the last page of the book, where
Yeah,
it shows up because it means spirit for so much of the book. And then
yeah,
towards the end of the book, it starts to mean intellect more. But of
yeah.
course,
We
Mann
talked
doesn't.
we talked about Trieb, also the word at some
Yeah,
point a couple of days ago, where that means drive, but can mean instinct, can mean desire, all these different things.
I
And
did wind up using Drive for that.
interesting.
I
Okay.
figured out how to make it work with
Yeah,
Drive.
it's very Freudian. But anyway, I mean, we haven't, I mean, basically what you're seeing is what we've been doing. So we have for the past few years been meeting. First, we met online because of the pandemic. We met online and just start meeting, talking about passages of the book. And
But
Susan,
like not, I mean, not just talking, but like she is listening to me read entire, like all the hardest passages I'm having trouble with. she's letting me read to her while she reads along in the German so that we can get really a bilingual conversation going about the stickiest bits. It has been like amazingly helpful. I don't know how I've ever translated before without this. I don't think I'll be able to translate in the
Well,
future.
and for me, it's been extremely helpful because it's really also sharpened for me the sense of what choices Thomas Mann actually makes and how I am going to present this to a broader audience. You know, ultimately, we are looking at the same question in terms of thinking, how are we mediating this text to a
Yeah.
broader audience today, this 100-year-old text, right? How do you do it in terms of really getting into the weeds of the language? And how do you do it in creating a kind of larger apparatus to contextualize the novel? So that's really the conversation that we've been having. And at some point we met in person, which after a lot of online, and have been continuing meeting. And today is kind of special because you finished. So that's really so can I say it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't feel like it's fully done because there's this like horrific punch
It's
list.
amazing. I
I
mean,
don't,
it's
I don't, I don't
really,
think you could, maybe, I don't know if you'll be able to see all these like sticky notes sticking out of the edge of my book, but these are all unresolved questions that still have to be done. But I like 2 days ago made it,
come on, you
made it of
finished.
the book. Yeah, it's done, but thank you for the claps, everybody.
It's
But
really amazing.
I'm going to spend the next few days going through all these unanswered questions and begging Veronica for help for a lot of them because they're all the things that I was like, am I sure I understood what this German sentence says? Am I sure that, yeah, there's
Yeah,
but
I'm sure there are some things maybe to iron out, and we started doing that. But
it's
that's
done. It's
that's
done.
really amazing.
It's done adjacent.
Done it, Jason.
Should we read some?
Something that Thomas Mann might say. But anyway, so we talked about how we started working together, but we haven't really talked about what the book is about for us. And so maybe and I think we have different narratives also of the book. So I'll have you start out, and then I can add what I think.
Okay, so for me, this is a story that starts out in this, in fact, kind of Kafkaesque way. You know, somebody who is not sick goes to a place where the sick live and finds out that nobody is healthy and never manages to get away from there, except I don't know about spoilers. We'll leave the ending undiscussed at this moment. Although no, we are going to talk about it
We're
later.
going to talk about it. So
Yeah,
this is a spoiler alert if you
spoiler
don't know.
alert.
Yeah,
In the
sorry.
end, he does leave, but really only at the very, very, very end, and it's not the way you think it's going to be at all. But to me, this is a book about education, comma, his, comma, ours, comma, the authors. Um, People talk about it as a Bildungsroman, a novel of education, but I really feel that it's a record of Thomas Mann working through all the ideas that he sees circulating in Germany around World War I, leading up to it. But he's writing with the hindsight of afterwards, but the book is set before, very importantly, which he talks about because World War I was this explosive, it was just like a a bomb went off in the middle of the 20th century. And he's writing in the aftermath of this, but trying to figure out what went wrong. And so I feel like he's using this story as a way to get the reader thinking about all the ways in which culture contributed to this big explosion and our
Yeah, and
have
I
this
like what
character
you
who
said.
belongs to Gride. Okay, I'm done.
Sorry to interrupt. I like what you said about the education and that in a way it's also his education. It's the reader's education. It's Hans Castorp's education. And I think what's really important is he started before World War One, right? Taking notes on this novel and that there's this whole political transition that he makes through writing this novel where he starts out with a very conservative kind of folkish background, really, and then comes out as a Democrat, right, in the early 20s and really does this incredible transition that you also see if you really dig into the text. you see it happen in the novel also, right?
The man who started writing it is not the man who finished the book.
Absolutely.
But rather
Absolutely.
than rewriting the opening entirely, you see the work in progress.
Yeah. No, and it's also about it's about what I like to say is that it has two mysteries, the novel, right? It's about love and it's about death. And the narrators, reveals certain things about what happens, but also conceals a lot of things. So one of the things that the reader is kind of not shown is whether the two protagonists, Hans Castorp and Claudia Chauchat, actually get together and have sex after talking in French for pages and pages and pages. Um, and then at the end, does Hans Castorp, the main protagonist, actually die? And so it's love and death and everything else wound up in it. So,
And
um,
as we were say, as you were telling me earlier today, it's like the opposite of what would actually happen in a novel. Like the things that are the main things you would see in great clarity in a novel are left blurry, and the things that might be around the edges are just incredibly detailed and sharp in their descriptions. And so there's this strange feeling of what's concrete about the book are the ideas in this very strange way. The actual
yeah.
actions are often a little fuzzy.
Yeah, and that also has to do with the time management of the novel, right? How certain things are sped up and slowed down, and you have things that seem so uh so minute take so much room, right? And then the things that are dramatic all of a sudden are, as you said, blurry, right? That they're not in sharp focus. So yeah, it's also an interesting, yeah, it's an interesting way of seeing and reading in the novel. I think a very new experience for the readers of the time, and maybe now, hopefully now. So, but we can jump to maybe talking a little bit about the kind of work we've been doing together, and showing that. Do you want to start out with the beginning?
Sure. Should I read
So,
it? Should I read the first paragraph in
yeah,
English?
and I just want to preface this. So this is the very beginning of the novel, and Hans Castorp arrives. Or actually, it's
Not
before
yet.
Hans Castorp arrives. Sorry, it's the beginning before the beginning. But what I wanted to say is, we had so many conversations about the first paragraph, and particularly about the first word of the novel. Well, maybe we'll read it and then talk a little bit about what we did. So I'll start reading the German, and then Susan will read her translation. Vorsatz. Die Geschichte Hans Castorps, die wir erzählen wollen, nicht um seinetwillen, denn der Leser wird einen einfachen, wenn auch ansprechenden jungen Menschen in ihm kennenlernen, sondern um der Geschichte willen, die uns in hohem Grade erzählenswert scheint, wobei zu Hans Castorps Gunsten denn doch erinnert werden sollte, dass es seine Geschichte ist und dass nicht jedem jede Geschichte passiert. Diese Geschichte ist sehr lange her. Sie ist sozusagen schon ganz mit historischem Edelrost überzogen und unbedingt in der Zeitform der tiefsten Vergangenheit vorzutragen.
Prologue. The story of Hans Castorp that we mean to tell, not for his own sake, for the reader will find him to be a simple, albeit appealing young fellow, but for the sake of the story, which strikes us as eminently worth telling, while it must also be emphasized, as we wish to do Hans Castorp justice, that the story is his, and that not every story can happen to just anyone. This is a story from olden days. It's practically dripping with historical verdigris and must without fail be presented in the verb tense connoting the deepest past.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I loved hearing
Um,
you read the German. It's such crazy good writing. It's strange.
yeah, but you really capture. I love the passage where the historischer Edelrost, that you translated it with
Talked so much about that.
historical verdigris, right? Just a beautiful image. And we talked a lot about Vorsatz and prologue, right? Because there were so many ideas and versions. Maybe you want to.
Yes, Veronika also organized a 2-day symposium around the translation of this book at Dartmouth, where she teaches, in which she invited like 24 Thomas Mann experts, right? Maybe it was closer to a dozen, but
Sure.
a whole bunch of people where we sat around talking about.
I think it felt to you like 2000.
It was amazing. It was amazing. But like I have a list from my copious notes from my notebook of all the suggestions for the first word for the title, which is the first word of the book, Vorsatz, which literally means before sentence before, like sentence that comes before. But the word Vorsatz can also mean intention. And as we were discussing, before this Zoom went live, very often titles are hard to translate, and this word falls into that category because writers gravitate to words that are interesting, that have multiple resonances. And so it's pretty frequent for a title to possibly mean more than one thing. And often when you translate it, you can't really get all that. You can't get the setting of the intention, which the word could also be interpreted to mean, as well as just forward, which the word also means. And so here are some of the suggestions that came through. My original translation of it was completely outside the box and unacceptable, but it was on the flyleaf. Because Vorsatz, that word can also mean the flyleaf of a book. So that page between the cover and the book proper. I saw reason. I had sense talked it to me and left that translation go. So here's some other ideas. Forward, by way of introduction. I like that one. Before we start, a few sentences before we begin, before we set out, prelude, proposito, plan, proposal. All of these could have been titles. And in the end, I went back to the simple prologue because the word also means that. And prologue, because log comes from logos, meaning word, prologue is literally foreword. It's 4 sentence. So it's whatever the Latin for sentence would be. But after all that thinking, I came down to the relatively straightforward prologue that you would read, and you would never think that the translator thought about anything else, because it's like, in a sense, the most obvious choice.
But it took forever. It really was. I think we had discussions about this for a really long time. But I mean, and there is so much more in there. I mean, there's also the whole relationship to music in the novel that is contained in Satz, right, which is a musical term, and so on. So you lose a lot of things, but you also gain with prologue. So I think it works. But I mean, the beginning of this book also led us to talk a lot about the narrator and in the novel, and we talked already about concealing and showing things, but also the relation. I think that was a recurring theme in our discussion, the relationship between the narrator and the main protagonist, Hans Castorp, and how the narrator's kind of mean and and uh, and very yeah, opinionated, very uh, also egging on the reader in different ways and trying to take positions and so on. So that was a recurring theme also in the discussions. And we were just having a discussion this morning about the narrator and about the ending of the book, and maybe we should jump to that because that's of course fresh on our mind. So the ending is very, very, I think very moving. And I remember when I first, not when I first read it, but I listened to the book actually as an audio recording by an actor who was doing half an hour every day during the COVID pandemic. And when he finished reading the book and read these last lines, I cried. It was so moving. It was just yeah. So we'll read maybe the passage and your translation, and then talk a little bit about the decisions that you made. Fahr wohl, du lebest nun oder bleibest. Deine Aussichten sind schlecht. Das arge Tanzvergnügen, worein du gerissen bist, dauert noch manches Sündenjährchen, und wir möchten nicht hoch wetten, dass du davonkommst. Ehrlich gestanden, lassen wir ziemlich unbekümmert die Frage offen. Abenteuer im Fleische und Geist, die deine Einfachheit steigerten, ließen dich im Geist überleben, was du im Fleische wohl kaum überleben sollst. Augenblicke kamen, wo dir aus Tod und Körperunzucht ahnungsvoll und regierungsweise ein Traum von Liebe erwuchs. Wird auch aus diesem Weltfest des Todes, auch aus der schlimmen Fieberbrunst, die rings den regnerischen Abendhimmel entzündet, einmal die Liebe steigen?
I would love to know the answer to that question. Okay, the English. Adieu, whether you live or will be left behind. Your prospects are poor. The dreadful dance you've been swept up in will go on for many a sinful little year, and we are not prepared to stake much on your survival. In all honesty, this is a question we're quite content to leave open. Adventures of both flesh and intellect that enhanced your simplicity, made it possible for you to survive in spirit what you are in no way assured of surviving in the flesh. Moments came when, amid all the death, the unchaste carnage, a dream of love sprang up within you, a portent to your reigning mind. Could it be that even amid this world festival of death, this grim fever lust igniting the rain-soaked evening sky, love will one day arise?
Beautiful ending. Um, yeah, I mean,
Let's
I,
hope
I
so.
think, huh?
Let's hope so. I
Well,
feel like where he leaves it is like so relevant for where we are now today.
right.
Now he's looking at this catastrophe that's just like enveloped the entire world and thinking, will love somehow save us?
Yeah.
No.
And it is this image. I mean, we didn't talk about the image before, but we see the protagonist Hans Castorp stumbling along bodies, mangled bodies, and the battlefield of World War One. So he ends up, a soldier in World War One, and then the narrator kind of takes us away from him, and we don't know whether he'll survive. So this is the scene. Someone says, "Love can save us," in the chat. That's very nice.
Uh,
Um, and yeah, so that it's the question, is it something that is still there for Hans Castor, something that can save him, or is this, for the future? So we talked a lot about this morning, some things about form, basically how we talked about the present tense here, like, and you heard the beginning, the past tense of the beginning, and then the present tense of the ending. Um, and we talked about actually also the question of bleiben, right? The first line, fahr wohl, du lebest nun oder bleibest, right? So what does bleiben mean? Does it mean he's dying in the battlefield, right? To be left behind? Is he left behind by the narrator, right? So he's just abandoned by the narrator. Is he dying on the battlefield? So all these different meanings we kind of went through.
yeah. It's amazing how much digging into a single sentence enhances how you think about the book as a whole, because like Mann writes with such complexity that, by the end of the book, it's like fugal, like every word is referring back to like four different things that the reader can know. I'm trying to keep the words resident enough that the readers can connect everything back like this. We talked a bit about this portent to your reigning mind, which in German was very
Yeah.
different. But reigning in the context of the book is something that Hans Castorp does. It means he's sitting somewhere and his thoughts are kind of above the world and holding sway as though he were in charge and thinking about things in a deeper way, in a way that as if his thought about it could help shape the world, which it can't. But it's a way of feeling, and that's called reigning in the book. And so the reader reading that word will think back to all the passages in which that's discussed, for example.
And you really made me think very carefully about what that reigning means. I mean, the attention to where it comes up, this kind of way of thinking, right? Of trying to, it's a form of control that is not control, and it's passivity as activity, that kind of tension, that is that one word that goes through the entire novel. That was really, really, really important to see that happen in your textual work. Yeah, I'm trying to think. In terms of the ending, yeah, Geist. We talked about Geist again. Because Geist is tough here. Abenteuer im Fleisch und Geist.
Adventures of flesh and intellect, but made it possible for you to survive in spirit. So it's like
Both.
both of the words are in there in English, but I'm just hoping that the reader. I tried to, earlier in the translation, I tried to knit them together a little bit, like the first few times the word comes up, to use them in conjunction with each other, in the hope that the reader will associate them with each other, because I feel like as a translator, you're also like a tour guide showing the reader of the translation how to read the book, meaning giving clues to things that they can't see because they were in the German and not in the English.
Yeah, and I think I like the word tour guide, because I think in some ways I really appreciated how you would step back and try to, I mean, not explain exactly, but give more to the reader in terms of really getting a handle on the language. I I can't explain it exactly, but it's really not describing something, but really giving a little bit more than you have in the German, in order to guide the reader, and to make it accessible, which is really important, for this translation. I see that we could go on. Should we do one quick one more, or should we
Let's do one quick one.
should we take questions? Okay, we can quickly do, either the drawing room or tous les deux. What do you think?
Tous les deux is shorter, but drawing room, I have a picture to show.
Oh, cool. Okay, let's do the drawing room then.
But I don't have a picture of the dining room.
What picture do you have?
I have a picture of my Sitzordnung.
Yeah, and apropos picture, I mean, I was just amazed. I mean, because you researched also the fashion so thoroughly. Like, I mean, I didn't have a conception of how many different clothing items are actually in this novel, and things that people just don't use anymore today.
And
And
also the fact that like back at this time they skied with one pole.
yeah,
And Thomas Mann, like he doesn't like he's writing that passage, I think, a little later, and he has Hans Castorp buy a pair of ski poles, but when he's skiing with one pole. And if you're skiing with one pole, it's a very different pole than one of the two little poles. Like the one pole is a much bigger pole. It's more like pushing a gondola or something, except it's you on your skis.
and you just have to research that, because the reader would not know that otherwise. I mean,
Or
but
should I show my picture?
show the image, yes.
Yeah. Well, is this actually, maybe it won't show up because I blurred my background.
A little, yeah, one can see a little bit.
I drew a picture of where everybody's sitting at the table because Hans Castorp, sorry, Thomas Mann leaves out, I tell you, he leaves out very important things. And only by drawing a map of where everyone is sitting at the table did I learn something he never tells us, but that is very important, which is that Joachim sits directly across from Marussia,
His crush.
his crush. Like Mann never tells us that. he never tells us where she's sitting, but if you like map out where everybody else is sitting and event, there's clues to everybody else, you can see there's only one seat left for her. And it's the seat directly across from.
And I mean, in those conversations, I mean, I think I learned so much about how fictional spaces are constructed, right? I mean, like we went through some of the spaces that were described and tried to come up with drawings and really not, sometimes had really different ideas of what a space looked like, or tried to figure it out. And
I think he has a strong spatial imagination. Like his description of the dining room doesn't really make sense. If you follow it carefully and try and draw a picture, it doesn't work out. But at any one moment, it works out for that moment. And I think that's more, I mean, when you think about it, like the sanatorium that he was using as his model, oh, well, it was actually
Yeah.
3 different sanatoria,
Yeah.
which,
It's a very impressionistic kind of notion of space. It's emotional in some ways also. And I think I learned that just through thinking through the language that he uses for space and thinking through it with you together. So that was really, and also,
time too. Time has so many different shapes in the book. So does space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe we have 20 more minutes, and I'd love it if we had more discussion and if there are questions. I mean, we can go on and on, and
We should probably stop.
we should probably stop and let people ask some questions.